Hello and welcome to this special author interview for the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Spotlight. I'm Frasier Armitage, part-time robot, full-time nerd, author of New Yesterday and Time's Ellipse, and joining me today is the guest star of the entire event. It is the genius writer and my good friend Emily Inkpen. Emily, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm one of the guest stars. I don't think I am the guest star.
Also, for anybody who is tuning in and thinking, wow, Emily's taking a while to respond, we have like a big delay between us. So, we'll work through it because we're absolute pros. But, if you do, as an audience member, think, why is there a second in between the question and the answer? Now you know the behind the scenes of how these things work.
Indeed.
So, first question, Emily. Who are you and what are you doing here?
Well, that is a question I ask myself most days. It has to be said. No, who am I? I am the author of the Dex Legacy universe. I am the writer of the audio drama, co-director of all the actors and cast and everything. The Dex Legacy is a science fiction audio drama based on novels that I wrote. It has a big cast. I think we've got like a core cast of about 17 now, which is pretty big. We've also started work on a new spin-off for the Dex Legacy, which is coming out soon. And we're going to be going into Kickstarter in September for season 3. It's doing super well. A bit overwhelmed by how well it's doing around the world. We've just passed 210,000 downloads, which is pretty big. And yeah, I'm very, very happy and excited about this. So yeah, it just keeps building and building, and it's wonderful to find the audience.
And I think with audio drama, I know that we've talked about this a couple of times before on different platforms and things, but the audio drama happened as a result of a trilogy of books that you wrote, and that is amazing. And this kind of all happened very organically as a process. So have you finally adjusted to being an audio dramatist now as well as a novel writer?
Yeah, so that took a while because the novels came first. So I wrote these novels, and then Chris of Alternative Stories got in touch and said, "Do you want to write an episode of an audio drama?" And I was raised on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so I was like, yes, absolutely, I would. And it sort of grew from that seed that became episode 1. And for a long time, because the novels came first, and I'm always writing novels, I'm always working on novels, so I always sort of considered myself a novelist with an audio drama. And now, considering the fact that the audio drama has been out, none of my novels are actually published at the moment, though they are in the works. It's like I am technically to the world an audio drama writer first, and I'm kind of embracing that now. Ideas are coming to me as audio drama first, and then I've actually started working on a series of novels that run alongside it. So it's been a weird journey as a writer because it's sort of novels first, then audio drama as a prequel, and now novels that run alongside the audio drama. So it's gone novels, audio drama, novels, all inspiring each other and working along this timeline and layering up this world. And yeah, it's all sort of happening like that. I don't think you can set out to do something like that from the beginning. I don't think that's the kind of thing that comes with a plan. It's way too niche for that.
I think that it's very cool that the next step is that the novels that you're writing, which are based on the audio drama, will hopefully inspire more audio drama that will then inspire more novels. I feel like you hit like the ultimate like self-feeding cycle of creativity.
Yeah, and that in itself is potentially problematic because it means that there are so many things I can do. And really, the Dex universe is just growing. And every time I have an idea, it just adds to the to do list of projects in this world. And while that's wonderful, it's sort of like my to-do list is getting long, and the tasks within it are big tasks. None of them are little tasks. None of them are like a one-off little episode or a novella. They're all chunky tasks. Like, I will now write a series that does this. I could do a spin-off series that does that. And it's like, this is a series. I'm thinking series, not just single one-offs. And I kind of wish I could think single one-off just once, just once. But I'm just not that kind of writer. I think this massive world is building because I just get into a place and then just run with it and just keep building it. And some writers do that. Some writers write one-offs. I mean, you're much more of a one-off story person. I mean, I know you're building on something at the moment, but your concepts are much more sort of like, you know, contained as a writer, right? Like that's sort of how you do.
Yeah, that's how I write. I write in, I think, in terms of like, right, this is my story, this is my book, this is it. And then sort of like I'm sort of, you know, finding a patchwork of how all of these stories could maybe sort of interweave. But I know with your sort of imagination is operates on like this much grander world scale. So you're thinking of character, you're thinking of world, and so because of that, that means that you're not limited to, right, this is the story. You're thinking of the whole, and that helps. It must help with regard to sort of audio drama because you can see the whole as opposed to being thinking like, right, okay, this is what we're writing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think you're right. And to be honest, because the novels came first, the novels that are set 11 years after episode one, I know where it's going. I have this very clear destination in mind for the series. And it's really sort of, it's tricky because I'm walking this very narrow path where I know exactly where I've got to go to. But you also want to be able to follow the audio drama in its own right and sort of, you know, and expand in different directions. But I'm a great believer in necessity being the mother of invention, which really comes into play when you're writing across mediums, because you need to keep the consistency. Consistency is incredibly important when you're building an IP and you're building an ongoing world and you're using the same characters throughout. And it's very important to make sure that something huge doesn't happen 11 years earlier that they just would not even refer to, in that they're not even talking about in the books, because it's like, well, of course they'd think back that far, of course they would. And it's a bit of a challenge to do that. But yeah, I mean, it does just mean that I can expand in all sorts of directions, and it means I can bring in characters that I don't talk about in the novels, and I can expand through them. The spin-off series is set in a completely different country with characters that I don't even know at this point. So what I do with them, it can go in any direction, and that's very exciting. So that's a whole new world for me, these characters that have literally come about purely for audio drama, as opposed to me adapting characters that are in novels to the audio format. It's doing it the other way around. And again, I think that's what's making me really think I'm an audio dramatist first now, as opposed to a novelist, which is a really interesting shift for me.
Yeah, it shows such a wonderful growth in you as a writer, but also in the stories that you're telling as well. Because the spin-off that you mentioned, Wasteland, is so good. But it is very. I had the privilege of being able to read like early versions of the scripts, and it was just absolutely stunning. But I very much felt like there was a difference between these scripts that you've put together and then like the first season script and commentary of the Dex Legacy. I definitely feel like you've kind of embraced this idea of script writing. Is that when it comes to learning the skills for script writing versus novel writing, is that something that you've like learned by doing?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I think Wasteland, the Dex Legacy Wasteland, which is the name of this spin-off, it's sort of like the culmination of skills that I've learned through season one and season two of Dex, and that I'm now applying to my work now. And I think, I mean, season one, was improvised, completely improvised. We were making episodes and releasing them on the go. We were releasing episode 4. I hadn't even written episode 6 yet. I lived in fear for 3 months of my life. Absolute fear. I was like, I do not know what I'm doing. This is terrifying. And but we were building an audience, and people really liked it. And that season alone we were over 100,000 downloads when we released season 2. But season 2 was very different because I wrote the entire season before we went into Kickstarter and then went into the studio. So the entire season was done ahead of time. And it really, really helped with, I think, the pacing, with the overall plot arc. Season 1 covers 3 months of time. Season 2 is a week. And that is what you can do when you know what's happening ahead of time. Season 3 is probably about 5-6 days of time. And all of it's planned, all of it's mapped out. It's a completely different writing sort of experience. And Wasteland was similar. I feel like Wasteland and season 3 have really benefited from the experience of making the absolute terror and mess that was making season 1, and then the more sort of level sort of pre-planning and pre-writing of season 2. But I couldn't have got to where I am now with Wasteland and season 3 without going through that process as a writer. And yeah, it's very cool. And I think it's one of those things people say, oh yeah, you go back to your previous novels, you go and look at your previous work, and you're like, oh God, but at the same time, season 1 did really well. We're still hooking listeners. People are still coming back. We've got that confirmation. We know that it worked, even though, despite all the odds, it worked. Yeah.
I think that when we've talked before about your writing process, you described it brilliantly as lighting the beacons. Do you think that that's still your writing process now?
Actually, weirdly, with the audio drama, less so. I really plan the episodes, and I've got this process down now where it's in a spreadsheet, and I never thought that would ever happen, ever, ever, ever. But there are spreadsheets involved now, and it goes by my current patent method is it goes by episode and then groups of character, because the audio drama, it focuses in on very specific groups. And so I'll say, okay, here's Nathaniel, Devik, Tristan, and Osa, and that's scene 1, and this is going to happen. Scene 2 is with the kids, that's going to happen. Scene 3 is with Valentina and Kit, that's going to happen. And then when I'm looking at this plan, I can see the distribution of the scenes across the different character sets, and I can see exactly how much time each set of characters is going to get in the show and in any given episode. And I've got a very visual plan of how that's going to be, and make sure that the balance is right, make sure that we're checking in with the right characters at the right time, and finding ways to do that. I mean, in audio drama, you can do that very clearly per scene of a show. And yes, I deviate from that a little bit. Like, I'm writing a scene and I'm like, well, this is all very well, but this scene is now 20 pages long, and, we need to break this up. I'll move one scene over there. You do that in the writing process, but it is much more planned ahead of time. And then I'll take that plan and I'll go to Chris, who's my partner in crime in all of this, the producer, and I'll explain the story to him and lay it all out and sort of sense check it. And normally he's like, oh my God, I can't wait for you to write this, which is very fun and affirming. And but then the previous novels, I was very much lighting the beacons, and that comes from the idea that that certain events are going to happen in the narrative, but how you get to those events remains exploratory. You are sort of finding your way to them. So it's not a planning, it's not making it up as you go along. There is a direction, but you've got enough wiggle room in between whiles to sort of find out. Now, the novels that are based on the audio drama are a different matter. So because they only follow the points of view of Varian, Isra, and Ren, we don't get the point of view of the adults. We don't get Valentina and Kit. We don't get these. It's just the kids. So I know where the kids are going, but there's a lot of stuff that happens with the kids that you don't see in the audio drama, because we only check in on them when something very, like important is happening, something very pertinent is happening for a particularly, in-depth conversation. But that means that when I'm writing the novel, there are a lot of very pertinent moments that you don't get in the audio drama that happen between those kids in between whiles. There's a lot in the first book, which I'm currently sort of finalizing through beta readers, that you don't get in the audio drama at all. And I'm really enjoying working with that very specific timeline that I already know because it's already in the audio drama, but having the wiggle room to expand on their story and their side of it. It's a really weird sort of process jumping across these mediums. It really is.
So, when you're talking about your methodology, can you please call it Inkpen's ink plan? That would be amazing.
Yeah, you're right. I should do that. The ink plan. The ink plan
The
is
ink plan.
set. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's much better than the ink pants, isn't it? If you were trying
the
to
ink
pants
pants
it.
is definitely. Yeah, the ink plan. There is an ink plan. And I'm not even lying, because there's spreadsheets involved. You can't joke about that, spreadsheets.
Oh, spreadsheets are very serious, Emily. Very
Absolutely.
serious.
I'm very serious writer now. I use spreadsheets. Yes.
As soon as you start doing your writing on Excel, you know you've made it to the big time.
Absolutely, yes.
Tell me a little bit about sort of the things that you're looking forward to sharing with people at this fantasy and sci-fi spotlight event, because we've talked a little bit about you and your process and the things that you're working on. Are you looking forward to being able to talk about that more with people when you get to Shrewsbury?
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that I really want to expand on is just that. I mean, the whole process of writing across mediums and how it forces your writing process to change. And it really does force change, because, you think, okay, well, every time I go into a project, it's different every time, or this is really different. And every project is different, but this is, like jumping across mediums, being able to do this. And I work on a game as well. So I'm working on a narrative game that's a prequel. And that, again, incredibly different writing experience, because you've also got to take into account agency of the player and things like that, giving people meaningful choices without breaking who Varian, Isra, and Ren are. That's not easy. So these different ways of storytelling and different ways of writing, I really want to get into. You and I are going to be on a world building panel together, and I love world building. Obviously, my planet SP714 is so complicated. One of my pet peeves in science fiction stuff is when you've got a world which is basically a country. So you've got like a desert planet, and you've got a water planet, and you've got this is a land planet, whatever that means, and there's just then space becomes an ocean in between, in effect. But the ocean is called space, and then there's a lot more space in it. And but really, it's sort of countries across the ocean. Whereas SP714, so many different cultures, so many different countries, different languages, different phonetic patterns, different, political systems, all of this coming from a sort of history of settlers landing and then expanding from that point, and the process of expanding, and how the culture in the place where they landed is so much more rooted in ancestral history than places that they got to much later, which have their much more sort of identity entrenched in the planet and the planetary patterns, as opposed to looking back to the ancestors and things like that you can really play with as a writer and a world builder. And I was actually going to write a little book potentially as a Kickstarter prize for somewhere down the line, which would be about world building. It would be like who built SP714, because all the time I was building it, I was thinking in the shoes of the people who are getting off those seed ships. So was it really me building the planet, or was it them building the planet, or in conjunction? It was, especially when it comes to naming conventions. I'm a sci-fi writer. I can come up with names and exciting names out of the wazoo, but people who land in a new world aren't sci-fi writers. They will just name things because they're familiar. We've seen this with the United States. How many Manchesters are in the United States? How many Birminghams? You know, like there are so many, because people were just like, well, I'm from Birmingham, let's make a new one. And so in the place where they landed, there's a lot of Earth names going on in cities, because we know that people are bad at being original with names. We've seen this as a pattern. So yeah, it's talking about sort of world building, but through the point of view of the people who were actually landing there, as opposed to, as a writer, I am god of this planet, I will now name this thing something that nobody's ever heard of before. Things like that I want to talk about with you and with the other panelists and with the sort of the convention as a whole, how we go about writing, creating, building, because that's what we are. We're builders of different realities. And that is very exciting. Yeah.
You said that you could name things out of the wazoo. I think the wazoo would be
Yes.
so much better than a Manchester or a Birmingham. That would be so much more interesting.
So much more interesting. I mean, I think the
You
United States has 5 Birminghams. 5. Yeah.
and it doesn't have one wazoo as far as I'm concerned. Like
No
if there's
wazoos.
somebody who lives in wazoo, comment, right?
Please comment if you live in
You
Wazoo.
mentioned
Yeah.
something. You mentioned something amazing, and what I would love to see is like a Dex Legacy atlas of SP714 with these are the countries, these are the people who established the countries, and like a little historical thing. That would be amazing. But another thing that I want to see is the prequel, which is like the Dex origins. Like I would love to see how Nathaniel gets his hands and mitts on Isra and Varian and Ren, but you know all this already, so you know my
Oh,
wish list. So
loads of people want to know the origin story of Nathaniel Dex and want to know his plan. And his plan doesn't really come out until, I mean, in the books, as far as the kids are concerned, his plan doesn't become clear until book 2 of the novel series. So, he definitely has a plan. And it's a cool plan. Like, his plan is excellent. His methods are horrific, absolutely horrific. But his plan is great. I get on board with that. I can see the appeal of what he's trying to do and his vision. He's just an awful, awful person. And I love that about him, in terms of the fact that he's a villain that you can kind of get behind, but not if you look too closely at what's happening. And yeah, I mean, but his origin story is also kind of shrouded in mystery. And I like that, because I want, like, people find it frustrating. People know that I know, and they know they want me to tell them, but I kind of want to leave it a mystery, like a little bit of a mystery, because that's fun. Yeah. Leaving gaps.
yeah, you can leave a gap. You can leave it. I just want I want the Isra, Varian, and Ren growing up in the places where they grow up. And I'm not going to ask you about anything more about that, because I know that is off the table for talking about. But Varian, Isra, Ren growing up and then becoming the Dex children, I think would be very. And you don't even need to go into Nathaniel. You can just peek around the edges of that, and
I mean, to be
still leave
fair,
the
Barry, Nizra, and
mystery.
Ren were adopted when they were kids. Like, they were like 2 years old. So I think Varian was like just over 2 years old. Ezra was like 1.5, and Ren would have been 1. Like that's their sort of ages. They're literally known nothing else. And Nathaniel, I can tell people this because it's not a spoiler. It doesn't change anything. But Nathaniel, Tristan, Devik, and Osa have a sort of side experiment going on with these kids, which is related to sort of nature and nurture. And Devik and Osa are strongly of the opinion that if you raise a person, they will be as you raise them, and they won't be sort of if they don't know about their past, if they have no idea, they will just be what you raise them to be. Whereas Nathaniel and Tristan are of the opinion that kids are sort of genetically predisposed to certain behaviors dependent on how they were born. They've got that sort of like genetic predisposition personality thing going on. And so the founders have made it absolutely impossible for Varian, Isra, and Ren to know anything about their home countries. You know, finding out where they came from, who they are, you know, what they're supposed to have, you know, been in the past if the invasions didn't happen and if they were never brought to Dex Island. You know, I mean, they would have been killed if they weren't, you know, like these were high profile kids. Invading forces would have just killed them quietly and hoped that, you know, nobody noticed, and they probably wouldn't have done. I mean, you know, so these kids, they have no idea where they came from. And it's interesting sort of as a side bit of flavor to occasionally just sprinkle those moments in where you know, Tristan especially is like, oh, they're doing exactly what they would do considering where they came from. And he is particularly problematic in that he's very biased against one of them, who I won't name because of where he was born. And obviously he's not that anymore. He was raised out of that. And, you know, if he walked into the environment he would have been raised in now, I mean, he's like a shell of what he would have been raised to be, which is tragic. But, you know, you can see that when he behaves in a certain way, Tristan responds to it as though that's his true self shining through. And it's, yeah, this is like their side project. This is their side quest with these kids. It's like their interest is so layered. It's fun. Yeah.
So if any of that has given anybody listening to this any kind of theories or ideas as to who the kids might be and that kind of thing, come find Emily at the Nerdy Cafe in Shrewsbury on September 29th.
Please, yes.
And come and give her all of your theories, and then see what she thinks to them.
I honestly, nothing would give me more pleasure than hearing other people's theories about what is going on, because obviously I know. But the thing is that anyone who's listening, those ideas are fully legit. You know, like writing audio drama is a collaborative process. What the listener brings to the project is fully their own and fully, you know, legitimate in terms of world building and everything. It's not just me, the writer, who knows all of the answers. It's not just the producer who is dictating what things sound like. The listener is taking all of those things and interpreting it. And so all of that is fascinating. And you have to really be ready for that as a writer of audio drama. You have to like embrace that process. Yeah.
But can we say, like, you know, just as a, you know, can we just put to bed the idea that, you know, Varian, Isra, and Ren are just different aspects of Nathaniel's psyche, you know, and that he's actually just the only one. And so when you say it's a Dex legacy, it's only him. Can we put that theory to bed at least, or will you even sort of, you know, maybe have I just uncovered the real truth behind it all?
I honestly had never thought of that idea ever in my life. And I'm, from a very practical point of view, I'm thinking, wow, how does he have the time? like no, that can't happen, because then Nathaniel will be spending all his time in the lab and on battlefields and trying to run a country. He has to outsource. He's a manager, he's a CEO, he outsources his departments. So, you know, as much as he's a megalomaniac and he would like to do everything himself, he knows his limits. Yeah, for sure.
He's evil. He's not stupid, but he's, you know, he's evil. I think
he's very smart.
Yeah. So if that's your theory, then, you know, if you've got sort of like the chart at home as to how it all fits in the timeline, and, you know, then, you know, just it's I hate to tell you this, but it's, you know, give it to Emily as a souvenir, but prepared to be proven wrong. So they are independent people.
Or just congratulated on an incredible theory. Like,
yeah, I mean, imagine, right? You'll have a lot of rewriting to do to make that happen, from what I know.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily. These things like can just stand as crystal ideas on their own, you know. Like I'll carry on doing my thing for sure. Like I know where it's all going. Like I can't just derail the project. But oh my god, like you know, if somebody had come up with something like that, I would be so excited, so excited. Yeah.
So, if in terms of visiting the Nerdy Cafe and going to Shrewsbury and everything, which of course we want as many people to do as possible, is
Yep,
that have you
absolutely.
ever been to Shrewsbury, Emily?
I have not. No, no, I'm
Mm,
very excited. Yeah,
a new
yeah.
experience, yeah. It's
A new
um,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lovely, lovely. Is it town city? I think it's a. I can't remember which it is, but it's. I'm not too far from it myself, and it is lovely. You'll have a great time. And anybody who is around the area and everything like that, you all know where the Nerdy Cafe is. It's dead easy to get to. Come find us and come and see our world building panel. Which I think that what we should do is just we'll lay it out here now. If you think it's a good idea in the comments, we should come up with a catchphrase now, like you you can only no, you have to plan it to get a planet, right? Something like that, and then all of
Did you
us
just
try
come up with
to
that? Did you just?
yeah, but then all of us should try and get it in to like and then yeah, if you're in the audience and it's time for questions on the panel, stick your hand up and yeah, put that catchphrase into it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you
I
have
mean,
to
to be
plan it
honest,
to
that
get a
we could
planet.
make this a
Is that
drinking
acceptable?
game. We could make this a drinking game for sure. Like, not that I'm a bad influence on things at all, but you know, and it's a cafe, so maybe it would be a shot of espresso as the drink of choice, you know. But that could be a fun. You just see people who have been watching this would just be really wired, walking around.
Yeah.
Oh,
Or if you're having sort of like a nice relaxing herbal tea, they'll all be just you'll see them sinking in their chairs like this. It'll be
I'm
great.
so chill right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
come see us at the Nerdy Cafe. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily. And for if you've enjoyed listening into this, please come along. The Fantasy and Sci-Fi Spotlight. It's the Nerdy Cafe, Shrewsbury, September 29th. Emily, for anybody who wants to reach out to you and to because we've hardly even started talking about Wasteland, and I really wanted to pick your brains on that. So we'll
Oh
have to
man,
do
I
that
can talk
at the
about
cafe.
Wasteland. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
but for anybody who wants to reach out and ask you anything in between times, or just connect with you, where can people find you online?
I am at Emily Inkpen everywhere. So X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Threads. You can just search that on Blue Sky and I'll come up. Um, you know, at Emily Inkpen. I'm not complicated to find at all. I worked in marketing, so I know the importance of brand. And yes, so that's my yeah, my handle.
Awesome. Emily, as always, it's lovely to see you, and we will see each other in September, if not before. But have a fantastic time with the preparations you're making for Wasteland and the Kickstarter for season 3. And yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Thank you very much. Can't wait.